John, always on the hunt for the road less traveled, decided to book an Airbnb in a quaint, little town, nestled somewhere between the charm of the old world and the conveniences of the new. The town, as if frozen in time, offered a sense of calm, a retreat from the bustling city life he was accustomed to. The house he booked, a picturesque cottage, seemed to mirror the town's charm. A red-bricked facade, a small garden laden with marigolds and daisies, and a porch that invited visitors with its homely warmth. But, there was something uncanny about it, something that made the corners of John's mouth twitch with unease. A sense of discomfort that was hard to pinpoint but impossible to ignore. The host was a jovial man, with a wide grin that stretched from one ear to the other. He welcomed John with an enthusiasm that was infectious, yet unsettling. His laughter echoed a little too loudly, his eyes twinkled a tad too brightly, and his handshakes lasted a few seconds too long. As John stepped into the house, it seemed to hold its breath, as if adjusting to an unfamiliar presence. The walls, adorned with vintage photographs, seemed to watch him with an eerie silence. The wooden floors creaked under his weight, whispering stories of the past. The chandelier hanging above, with its flickering lights, added a theatrical touch to the unsettling welcome. Despite the discomfort, John shrugged it off. After all, he was no stranger to unfamiliar places and peculiar hosts. He was a traveler, and this was part of the journey, or so he thought. Yet, beneath the veneer of normalcy, something was amiss. The house, the town, the overly friendly host, all seemed to be part of a disturbing puzzle, a puzzle that John was yet to solve. Little did our protagonist know, this was just the beginning of a long and harrowing night. As night fell, the house began to reveal its true colors. The once welcoming abode took on an eerie persona as the shadows of the day turned into the specters of the night. The protagonist, once excited about their new temporary home, began to sense a shift in the atmosphere. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. A whisper here, a flicker there, the inexplicable chill that seemed to permeate the air. The whispers weren't just figments of imagination, they were distinct, almost as if carrying a conversation in a language unfamiliar yet oddly disturbing. The whispers seemed to echo from the house itself, growing in intensity as the night deepened. Then there were the shadows. They weren't the usual play of light and dark one would expect in a house. They seemed to have a life of their own, darting around corners, lurking in the periphery of vision, only to disappear when looked at directly. The house seemed to be transforming into a grand stage for these shadows, playing out an eerie pantomime that only escalated the sense of unease. But above all, it was the feeling of being watched, of a constant presence, that was the most unnerving. It was not malevolent, but it was persistent. An unseen spectator, observing, waiting, always there. It was as if the house itself was watching, its old walls and creaky floors a silent testament to a history unknown. With each passing hour, the protagonist's fear grew, morphing into a tangible entity. The excitement of the unknown had turned into the anxiety of the unseen. Sleep eluded them, the nocturnal orchestra of whispers, shadows, and the constant presence turning the house into a labyrinth of uncertainty. As dawn approached, the strange occurrences seemed to recede, like the tide pulling back from the shore. But the fear, the anxiety, they remained, etched into the protagonist's heart. The house wasn't just a house anymore. It was a puzzle, a riddle wrapped in a mystery. The house seemed to be alive, breathing with secrets buried deep within its walls. Every house has a history, but not all histories should be uncovered. As our protagonist navigates the labyrinthine corridors of this seemingly ordinary Airbnb, a peculiar sight catches his attention. A door, tucked away behind an antique bookshelf, as if intentionally hidden from the world. Pushing aside the dusty tomes, he ventures into the unknown, his curiosity piqued by this mysterious discovery. A hidden room, cloaked in darkness and heavy with the scent of forgotten years. The room seems frozen in time, untouched, and filled with a chilling stillness. The single source of light that filters in through a tiny, cobweb-laden window illuminates a table in the center. On it, a collection of old newspaper clippings, yellowed with age and brittle to the touch. The headlines scream of a series of unsolved murders that had once rocked the quiet town. Each victim found in their homes, the scenes eerily similar. The unsettling common thread? The houses were all owned by the same person, a man who was then only a primary suspect, but never convicted. A man whose face was all too familiar to our protagonist. The realization hits him like a punch to the gut. The overly friendly host, the man who had welcomed him into this house with a warm smile and open arms, was the man in the clippings. The same man who was once the prime suspect in a string of horrifying murders. The same man who had seemingly vanished from the face of the earth, until now. The cozy living room, the charming vintage decor, the quaint little town, all a facade hiding a gruesome past. A past that was now threatening to repeat itself. The sense of dread that had been a mere whisper at the back of his mind now roared into a deafening crescendo. The charming Airbnb had turned into a house of horrors. When the walls of your refuge turn against you, where do you escape? The protagonist, trapped in a chilling scenario, finds himself grappling with this very question. His heart thumps in his chest like a war drum as he hastily scans the room for any possible escape routes. The house, once a promising haven, has now morphed into a labyrinth of dread. Each corner he turns brings an unnerving sense of uncertainty. The host is on the prowl, his sinister intentions lurking in the shadows. Our protagonist's survival instincts tell him one thing: he needs to escape, and he needs to do it now. With each tick of the clock, the urgency intensifies. His mind races, formulating a hasty plan of action. He remembers a window he'd seen in the hallway earlier. It's a tight squeeze, but it's a chance. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, he darts towards it, his footsteps echoing in the eerily quiet house. The suspense mounts, the danger palpable. It feels like the house itself is holding its breath, waiting for the culmination of this terrifying cat-and-mouse game. The protagonist reaches the window, his heart pounding in his ears. With a final push, he manages to wriggle through the narrow opening, gasping for breath as he tumbles onto the unfamiliar street below. Safe from the immediate threat, he takes a moment to collect himself before pulling out his phone and dialing those 3 life-saving numbers, 911. As he hears the reassuring voice on the other end, he can't help but shudder, the magnitude of what he just experienced sinking in. He's escaped the jaws of death, a narrow escape from an Airbnb nightmare. But as he watches the flashing red and blue lights approach the house, he realizes that the horror is far from over. A sense of dread washes over him as he wonders what lies in store for the unsuspecting future guests of this house of horrors. The protagonist had escaped the jaws of death, but the horror was far from over. Even after the most terrifying storms, the sun does rise again. In the aftermath of such a harrowing event, the protagonist had to grapple with a new reality. A reality that was shaped by an encounter that could have been avoided with a little more caution. The police took over, their blue and red lights casting an eerie glow over the Airbnb property that was once thought to be a charming retreat. The host, once a friendly face, was apprehended, his dark secrets spilled out for everyone to see. The protagonist was left to cope with the aftermath, the lingering echoes of the horror they had experienced. It was a harsh lesson in the importance of vigilance, especially when traveling alone. And sometimes, these dangers can hide behind the most unsuspecting facades. Reflection came in waves for our protagonist. They thought back on the red flags that they had initially brushed off, the small signs that indicated something was off. It was a terrifying experience, but one that highlighted the importance of trusting one's instincts. Traveling alone is an adventure, a chance to explore the world on your own terms. But it also requires a heightened sense of awareness, a keen eye for the details that might seem insignificant at first glance. The protagonist realized that they had let their guard down, lulled into a false sense of security by the charm of the Airbnb and its seemingly friendly host. As they moved forward, they carried with them a newfound wisdom, a reminder to always be cautious and vigilant. To trust their instincts and to not ignore the signs, no matter how small they might seem. It was a terrifying experience, but one that taught them a valuable lesson about the importance of safety when traveling alone. As our protagonist learned, sometimes, the most charming facades hide the darkest secrets. Thank you again for joining us for another video. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe and comment down below and let us know what you would like to hear in the near future. See you all again soon.